our first presenter today. We have Matthew Dodgson, who is the head of Global Solution Engineering for Blueprint with us today. And Matthew is going to be talking about RPA Unlocked, how to migrate bots from one RPA platform to another to drive increased business value. Matthew, it's a real pleasure to have you with us. We're very much looking forward to your presentation today. Thank you for taking the time and sharing that with us. So Matthew, first of all, where are you coming from today? I'm in San Antonio, Texas, for those of you who are wondering. My lights are still on because finally, after all the crisis that we have had here in Texas with power outages. And Matthew, where are you coming from today?
So I'm based out of our head office here in the Toronto, Canada area. So we're definitely both in the same boat of having snow, although I think we're probably a little bit more accustomed to it up here.
That's right. Beautiful Toronto, Canada. Matthew, thank you so much for taking the time to share your wisdom and insight with us today. We're all very much looking forward to your presentation.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jose, for having me. All right. Well, appreciate that intro and appreciate everyone's time today. I'm going to jump in and we're going to get going. As Jose mentioned, my name is Matthew Dodgson. I head up the Global Solution Engineering Group here at Blueprint, which gives me a lot of perspective and a lot of insight into what our customers are doing. And I look forward to sharing some of those stories and some of the approaches and practices and challenges that they're facing today and what we're seeing with the industry and how the Blueprint platform, what we're going to talk about today, is helping folks get through. Before we get started, just want to give you a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to give you a quick overview of Blueprint, give you an understanding of really what we're seeing in 2021 with respect to the RPA industry, the RPA space in general, and how platform migrations are really becoming a hot topic and a hot challenge in the RPA industry. Give you really a little background around the challenges around switching RPA tools, where Blueprint fits in this, and overall, and most importantly, provide you a little demonstration of how exactly we can, we've done this in a few situations, and I'll give you an example today of how we can do that. Now, pleasure to meet you as always. We are Blueprint. We're a leading provider of digital process design and management solutions for Fortune 1000 companies. Global leaders from every industry are using our cloud-hosted enterprise automation suite in concert, in tandem with our RPA platforms to really design and manage those automations, both getting them into production as well as manage them once they're in production. And we, at the core of our platform, we have what's called a digital blueprint. Creating a digital blueprint really replaces the need for time-consuming, error-prone documents like a PDD. It digitizes all of that documentation work into nice digital assets, and this enables our customers to spend less time designing, managing, or fixing automations, and more time on things that directly grow their business and align the business value with the automations that they're building. So what do we mean when we say, when they say they use us alongside their RPA tool to really identify, design, and manage automations? Well, today, the most common way for organizations to define what's needed and when they build automations is to use manual documentation, such as a PDD or PDD, SDD, Visio diagram, all of those things. But when you're trying to scale RPA past those simple processes, those low-hanging task swivel chair processes, this overall practice of documents really starts to break down, and it really trivializes the important information that we work on today when we actually build automations. To give you some context, many of our customers, to quote them, this manual world of documents is complex, it's convoluted, and error-prone and confusing. What Blueprint does is really replace the need to create these time-consuming, error-prone documents and really focus on the information which is at the heart of the RPA suite, which is that process. We can, from Blueprint, ingest current state processes from leading process mining and discovery tools, or from unstructured document sources, things like Visio, Word documents, older PDDs. And from there, you have a centralized, collaborative place to design and store what we call these digital blueprints, which again replace that manual documentation and contain all the information that you need to efficiently deliver an automated process. Now, some of the benefits of using our enterprise automation suite to create these digital blueprints is really centered around having all of this, important tribal knowledge in one place, having information that stakeholders and the team can come together and align around really streamlines the workflow and improves the overall project delivery speed and precision. Our centralized platform includes some intelligence that allows you to start discovering areas of reuse and areas that you can leverage that have already been created. And our enterprise analytics and dashboarding helps you prioritize and measure what's working and manage that change proactively to really sharpen your strategy across the organization. And this is really designed for all stakeholders. It's easy to use and integrates directly with your RPA platform and delivers an end-to-end solution. And it's something that from a technical person all the way through to a business individual, everyone understands what a digital blueprint is. So what is a digital blueprint? What are they? Digital blueprints, as we've mentioned, are at the core of our enterprise automation suite. And so they're much more than just process models. They contain everything you need to efficiently and effectively deliver high quality digital workers. They include the detailed process flows. They can be decomposed into granular, step level details. They include all the dependencies that relate to the systems or compliance regulations or requirements and stories that are used to deliver these automations. And using our enterprise automation suite to build these digital blueprints for your future state processes is incredibly easy. In fact, our platform provides the most powerful process design environment available in the market while remaining super user-friendly and collaborative. But what makes our platform really unique is the ability to transform your process models within digital blueprints and automate them into a myriad of other packages. For example, we can automatically generate all the functional test cases, all of the user stories, so you can quickly build and get your digital blueprints turned into a backlog of stories as well as test cases. But we can also take those digital blueprints and generate a bot package or a bot framework that we can send into the RPA platforms. We can create a BP release file, a UiPath zip file, an ATMX file, even Power Automates package. And again, this just helps accelerate the automation development. And really at the core, what digital blueprints do is they allow us to focus on three key areas. The first two really revolve around the automation lifecycle of building automations and getting them into production. So this is an important area that we can drive efficiency, effectiveness, and really scale the approach. The second piece is really around managing those automations once they're live. How do we keep track of these automations, not just from a reactive firefighting mission about putting those fires out when they pop up, but to be much more proactive with how we manage these dependencies, be able to anticipate if we change a system like SAP, what automations are going to be impacted. And the last, which is what we're going to talk about today, is really a use case around how we can leverage this common language of a digital blueprint to migrate these automations from one platform to another, using these digital blueprints in the blueprint platform as a framework to do so. So it's no denying it, RPA is red hot these days, as Jose mentioned, and now more than ever, especially with COVID and really the challenges of being a remote workforce. And obviously, according to many researchers, Gartner one in specific, they anticipate the demand for RPA to continue to grow because of COVID-19. And the decreased dependency on the human workforce for routine digital processes is going to be more attractive to end users, not only for cost reduction, but also for ensuring their businesses against future impacts and really focusing their workforce on the high value processes and high value tasks. And the reality is the lure of automation is very compelling for organizations that are overwhelmed with what's going on right now. Now, despite the obvious value that can be gained from RPA, there's a growing desire across the automation space to not be handcuffed to one automation vendor, be able to leverage the differences and the best practices in each of these automation vendors. There's a few different reasons that we're finding folks in the industry want to switch vendors. In some cases, they're failing to get value around the current technology they've chosen. And so the RPA programs have been, unable to scale effectively, and they've been burdened with maintenance downtime, so they have to move to a new RPA tool. So they're challenged with, did we pick the wrong tool? They really have, in some cases, unfulfilled promises by, vendors that have tried to, either promote a larger adoption, and they're just having trouble utilizing all that. In some cases, they're eliminating islands of automation as they've grown in their automation discipline. They've had different groups that have spun up different technologies. They want to consolidate that onto one platform. And in some cases, there's challenges with incompatible version upgrades. The Automation Anywhere customers are facing a huge challenge with moving from V11 to 2019. And in many cases, it's made them reevaluate, are they on the right platform? So these are all factors that face the industry today. And with all these valid motivators, driving the desire to switch RPA vendors or really, be able to have that flexibility, historically there have been some significant challenges with doing so. We ran a poll over LinkedIn, and we had the respondents kind of provide some feedback, and these were some of the biggest barriers. And by far, the cost of switching was the biggest blocker, while we saw significant representation from other barriers like incompatible bots and user management efforts and scaling challenges. It really comes down to it's costly to do so. So historically, that was the case, but Blueprint has developed a very unique capability with our platform that we'd like to show you today. In fact, Blueprint is the only platform on the market with this capability and can do it, can help organizations migrate 3 times faster and at 75% of the cost when compared to other methods, the manual methods of migration today. Now, due to our integrations with the leading RPA vendors like Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, and UiPath, you can use Blueprint to reverse engineer robots from either of those platforms and create a digital blueprint, and centralizing this into a common digital blueprint model. And just like with any other digital blueprint, it can be then used to create a digital worker, by generating that bot package and sending it into a new platform. So if you initially start building bots on Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, or UiPath, and you feel trapped due to the high cost of redeveloping all those bots, with moving over, with the RPA migration capabilities we're going to talk about today, you can dramatically reduce the switching costs and really streamline and put a real workflow around that migration and transition to a platform like Blue Prism. So to give you a bit better understanding, these are some of the examples of the switching costs that we've seen today, on an average bot. Let's call it, I know there's no such thing as an average bot. We'll take the idea of an average bot. Without Blueprint, migrating robots is really time consuming and intensive, and it's a manual effort. And a lot of times people don't realize that it's basically like redoing an RPA project, but instead of starting from a business process, you're starting from a working automation, which sometimes makes it a little bit more challenging. You still have to go to the same steps of documenting and capturing everything that was already there, sometimes resurrecting old documentation, and then you have to re-implement and retest everything. But what we can do with Blueprint is dramatically cut into each of these sections by allowing you to automatically document and reverse engineer all the existing automations into digital blueprints, and then using the digital blueprints to automatically generate a bot framework that the developers can pick up from, providing all of that code and content down into the development space and allowing the developers to spend more time reconnecting wires instead of recreating things from scratch. And obviously things like test cases and user stories are vital to be able to streamline this, and our ability to automatically generate those is really what helps drive this efficiency and the reduction in that life cycle. So that's a quick overview of kind of the approach. What I'm going to do is actually take you through an example of migrating a bot from one RPA tool to another. And while we're doing that, we're actually going to show you some of the pieces that are involved in the Blueprint platform. Just doing a quick time check here. We are good. So we're going to start off with an automation in UiPath that interacts with native applications like Excel, or with web applications, and even with an image-based or surface automation. So for example, if I dig in here to the SAP process, here's an example of an image-based or surface automation. If I scroll down a bit, if someone is migrating and they didn't create it, it takes effort to figure out what we're doing here. For example, if a snippet of some part of the screen, but the screen may have like 100 fields on it, I can't tell what it is. So this is going to take someone time to really dig in and extract what this automation is actually doing. And if I pull into the properties, to figure that out, I got to go through all the various properties and backtrack to find the anchor image and figure it all out. And that's just for one step. Now we do this at scale. Let's say this is even a 10 to 20 step bot. That's a very meaningful amount of time. That's where that, first week or week and a half comes into just figuring out how this bot operates. So now I'll show you how that first step of migration works in Blueprint. So here I'm just going to log in. Now here we are in Blueprint. I'm going to actually go in and I'm actually going to import that entire bot file from UiPath. Or here I'm going to take the project file from UiPath if you want to be specific. And in doing so, Blueprint imports the entire project. So here on the left, you should recognize the exact same structure as you saw in UiPath. Blueprint has automatically imported everything, including the data, the reference documents, even the XAML, even the XAML file has been automatically converted into what we call a digital blueprint. But more importantly, Blueprint parses all the information and provides us some key metrics, information to help make these decisions. For example, if you look at the process at the top of the list, you can see that it has 264 steps and 44 decisions in it, and it interacts with things like web applications. So we're just able to start parsing all this information and provide some meaning and some context, again, that is not code, that really helps make this more transparent to the group. Now, if I dig into one specific piece, that one XAML file for things like this Q2R login, here's the digital blueprint that was automatically created. I'm going to open one step, and specifically, if I look into this step, I can see all of the information that was brought in, not just from a process in respect to the digital blueprint, but all the underlying parameter information for each step as well is also parsed and brought into the system. So this helps me not only get an overview of what that process does, but it gives me the details, and I have those details right at the tip of my fingers. Now, if I click on, for example, another one here, my SAP process, this is an image-based surface automation. So now we need to activate, the blueprint to unlock all of those detailed pieces. So I'm going to convert this to a digital blueprint here. And now with the features available, I'm going to hit our intelligent process feature. And what that's going to do is it's going to rewrite, it's going to gather all the information it can from those detailed steps. So the first thing it did was it made this process more readable. Things like type in SAP T code, press enter, type in a doc number. Blueprint also has the images pulled from UiPath. Since this is an image-based automation, these are, of course, go into the system responses. We actually have all those different image screens that are attached to these, system steps here. Then, of course, you go to the system responses that illustrate things like how it responds to the digital worker. This makes the process overall far more understandable to everyone. So if I collapse this Explorer over here, and I open up things like our intelligent recommendations, based on the information in this process, now Blueprint can actually provide some suggestions. It's found some similar process component. Also, there happens to be a couple of regulations related to this process. And so if those are related, if those are things that we need, we can actually grab those and we can link them in. We just select it and we add that to the list of dependencies. So what you saw me do here is really leverage not just Blueprint to simplify and streamline the understanding of that automation, but to also give me a way to look across all my automations and see if there's areas that I can reuse and centralize them and make them a little bit more streamlined. And here specifically, if I go into the relationships tab, you can see that this process is now tied to those different dependencies, things like that regulation. You can also see the connection it has to any PDDs and things we've pulled in previously that we can pull in from documents. And finally, Blueprint can take this entire set of digital blueprints that we've improved, and it can automatically populate them and generate that bot package that we talked about before. So for example, here, I can take this and actually generate a BP release file from Blue Prism. Now I'm just going to hop over into Blue Prism and show you what that looks like. So here, if I log into Blue Prism and I sign in, we can bring in the BP release file into the studio. And if I go over to that studio and I open it up, we can see that Blueprint has automatically created this standard Blue Prism template. So this is the bot template or bot framework that we can automatically generate off of that digital blueprint. So what it does is it takes that process flow, it translates it into a set of steps. But if I dig into some of the processes here that were brought over, for example, if I go to the web application, here's what that process looks like at a detailed level. So for example, if I dig into not just the process flow, but if I go into something like a detailed step, you can see that all of those variables and all that metadata that we bring into those digital blueprint steps, that's actually information that we pass over and we pass down into these detailed steps. So it really provides as much transparency and visibility as possible to bring over all of that information. Now, we're not going through and mapping every command 100% of the time because that's not our intention as a platform. Our intention is really to be a migration framework, really to provide a central framework to do so. We're able to map some of these commands, and in cases we're able to, we do that. But in cases, for actions we're unable to map, we put those in the notes field. We make everything available to you. Let me go back and show you that. We actually need to create a business object and map the parameters, and we're able to do that. So we're able to provide as much information as possible into these detailed steps to really make that translation and that transformation much easier. Now, if I go into, for example, the business objects that we created in this particular case, we're actually able to create the detailed business object from that command and that details that were passed down from UiPath. And here in this case is what it looks like. Now, with the various actions needed to support this process, we're able to bring everything together. Now, what's important in all of this is the migration is one of these scenarios where we want to bring things over. But in doing so, what we've actually done is create a repository and a catalog of all our automations. And if we fast forward to, as we migrate things, if we think about as we're migrating and, rewiring our automations, use different technology, we're also getting this important and powerful picture of how these automations function and why they function. So if I move forward, Blueprint is actually going to not only provide value in migration, but it's going to continue to deliver value throughout the life cycle of the new automations, helping to streamline changes and ensure continued compliance. For example, this dashboard you're seeing here in Blueprint is going to help us keep track of all these dependencies, all things like the SAP, T-code screen, or the regulations and the rules, all those things that we linked in to that digital blueprint. And for example, if there's a suggested change, or if there's a change that's coming up to a regulation here, I can prioritize and sort and filter by severity and priority. But when I pull up, for example, a specific change, and I want to understand, hey, if we make a change, that's going to instantly show me all of the automations, all of the digital blueprints that are going to be impacted or affected by that. So here I can see if we change this particular part of the regulation, it's going to potentially impact these 5 different automations. So instead of us waiting for automations to break because the regulation changed, which unfortunately that's the reality of today, Blueprint flips the whole script where now we can be proactive. We can actually create a funnel and a mechanism to process these changes, understand them, and at this point we can even alert and notify those owners directly through the Blueprint platform. You can enter a note in here and let them know via email, and there's even a built-in personalized dashboard where as teams and other members get notified, they're going to be able to catalog all those changes so they can really process them in a meaningful fashion and ultimately create less downtime, eliminate the downtime for these automations, but also deliver higher quality automations because we're able to keep the alignment and understand that these bots don't just break because they want to. They break and they're impacted because of changes and decisions we're making in day-to-day business or in day-to-day systems management. So, with everything we've shown you today, Blueprint is going to create value across numerous categories in the organization. From creating higher quality automation to keep everything in one place to ultimately driving that enterprise control and visibility. And so this really rolls up into the primary value of the automation suite, which is to significantly improve the automation quality and be able to drive better maintenance. And part of that quality, and what we talked about today, is really about migrating, is how can we reclaim all of this kind of tribal knowledge and organizational intelligence and put it in one centralized place to really not be handcuffed to a particular technology stack, but really allow us the flexibility and freedom to make the right decisions for our organization and our investment. And with that, I will pause, and that's everything we wanted to cover today. And I'll actually throw it back to Jose to see if he's got any questions that have come up in the chat.
Excellent, Matthew. So I am monitoring the questions coming in. I'm going to ask the audience to keep submitting those questions. Let me make sure that I have my interface here. Matthew, go ahead and stop sharing your presentation so that we can see both of us on camera at the same time.
Perfect.
Lots of questions related to the background of RPA. So this is a very interesting application you share here with us today. Let's set the stage a little bit with the audience. The varying levels of expertise from novices to experts in RPA. One of the themes that has emerged in the questions is a bit more foundational, so I will start with that. If you look back at the last 12 to 18 months, we had a pandemic happen during that time. What are you witnessing? What are you seeing in the field of RPA and implementation? Certainly there is more of it, But if you can talk a little bit from the business side, but also from the technological development point, what has happened with RPA in the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, so what we've seen, and again, you kind of teased it up when you set up the session here, is it's definitely been this kind of big push to get bots live quickly. I mean, RPA has the added benefit of being really quick to develop. So we've seen a lot of organizations jump into the deep end and try to get bots up and running. And in some cases, they've been able to get things up and running quickly, but in almost every situation, the challenge we see is, once they get a handful of bots live and they try to start scaling it out, they start to hit these scaling challenges, this kind of industrialization of automation. The reality of the documents, but just having all these automations centralized, when you move these tasks from manual people who can deal with change to digital workers, you take on the idea that these digital workers are not robust. They do what they're told, and when they don't get what they want, they just break. So you end up with this kind of careful balance where the automations you build, if you build them quickly, sometimes they're a little bit more brittle, they're not as robust, so they end up breaking and you spend more time with them. So claiming and reclaiming the RPA value that they're trying to get is the biggest challenge we see, day one. Is saying, oh, we can double this value. Well, we're spending all these extra man hours to build these bots, so all the value they save us, we're actually just turning around and spending into RPA. So what we're trying to do with many of those customers is say, listen, you're doing the right things. This is just a matter of visibility, transparency, and not digitizing. The ironic part about automation is that we build automations in the most manual way possible, and that's not really in the spirit of automation. So yeah, that's some of the things we're seeing.
Very well, very well. And another question that has emerged, and I would say a theme, because there are a number of questions around this, is with respect to intelligent automation with RPA. How are the smart robots coming along? And I'll set that up with, there was a very big, probably piece of news in the United States specifically this past week or two of one major airline that has a bot that uses for customer support, and people are laughing because if you go into that system and you ask, how do I change my reservation or something like that, I'm paraphrasing here, the bot will say back, I don't understand what you're talking about. Can you say in a different way? And it's like, it was so fundamental for the business of that company, and that's why it got so, drew people's attention. So the question is that, that's an isolated case. We understand that, probably a malfunctioning bot of some sort. But the real question behind is that, how smart are the bots today compared to what they were like 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, the bots, it's funny from a technology standpoint. I mean, there's obviously new things that help us. There's OCR, NLP, there's some AI that's starting to creep into the bot landscape, but the bots themselves have kind of grown a bit in intelligence. But I think what's happened is people have learned how to build more robust automations, not in the sense of, we've added the intelligence code, excuse me, but we've taken into case the different ways someone could phrase a question, the different paths, invoice processing. There may be 9 different ways that a customer, that an organization does it. And so their bots have to be able to handle those. So they're starting to spend more time really capturing that. So the intelligence is interesting. It's not so much intelligence in the automations themselves, it's intelligence in the process we use to build those automations, how we gather all the information from the business today in terms of, when you have a human do something, they deal with all these things and they can understand that. A bot can't, so we have to understand all those variables. So it really puts more of the pressure on the upfront design and understanding.
Very well, very well. And I'm gonna start picking some specific questions here. Let's see, Jenna Shinsley asks, what is the learning curve and implementation timeline when you're first bringing on Blueprint? What does that learning curve and implementation timeline look like?
Yeah, so it's interesting you asked that. I'm actually just underway with a few implementations right now with quite a few customers. So we get folks up and running in less than 2 weeks. And the interesting thing about that is everything I've shown you today, and again, this was a specific example around migration, but let's say you were just building automation. Everything you do today in documents, you would do those exact same things, but you would do them in Blueprint. So it's not that it's changing fundamentally how people approach the problem and how people approach their work. It just changes where they do their work. So the nice thing about our implementation and our enablement approach is that it gets people up and running so quickly, because it's literally saying, hey, let's just work through the bot you're trying to build today, and let's use that as an example to learn Blueprint and learn the mechanisms of these digital blueprints. The reality of that is, once you kind of remove this barrier of documents, you become a lot more proficient. But we've had a lot of success with get people up and running in that 2-week window, and it's been effective because these RPA time project lines tend to be 3 months on average, and we can start to make a significant impact in reducing that by 50% in even on the first automation.
And building on that, Brian Vinci has a couple of questions here. I'll get a sequence from Brian here, because these are pertinent questions on the flow that you're just on. First one, is Blueprint cloud-based or on-premise, or both?
So we are primarily a cloud-based solution. We do have a few customers that have had to use on-premise. It's the same technology stack for us either way. Our cloud-based offering is our primary offering, because that's what customers have been just leaning towards, and it gets them up and running much quicker. We're able to get them deployed the same day, and able to get them in there the next day, actually starting to onboard.
Very good, very good. And follow up from Brian still, does Blueprint reduce the time associated with the discovery and capture of new undocumented processes?
So we do. So the interesting thing with the discovery process, and there's a lot of discovery technologies that are out there, and there's a lot of challenges in the discovery space. With all these technologies, I see primarily with the customers I work with that they still sit down and interview their subject matter experts. They sit down in a video chat, they record the screen of what they're doing, and they transpose that, they transcribe it into a process. That whole activity is streamlined with digital blueprints, because we can build the process much quicker. We don't have to go through this manual document creation. But for folks that are using the discovery tools, one of the nice things is you can use like a Blue Prism capture to record someone's screen, and then you can send it into digital blueprints. You can actually turn that whole file that's captured, which today some of those spit it out into a PDD, but we can take that right into a digital blueprint. So you can go right from your discovery forum format file, whatever you're using today, and turn it into a digital blueprint, so you have it in your workspace now ready to build and design.
Excellent, excellent. And how does it work with multi-platform solutions, for like RPA integrated with NLP, OCR, chatbot technologies? How does that work?
Yeah, and the interesting thing for us is we are pretty agnostic when it comes to technology, because we're sitting a little bit further upstream. We're focused more on the design space, and really that gap, the alignment gap that happens between the business teams, the customers, the customer, and the technology team. We're really bridging that gap, which is documents today. That kind of information flows through in documents. So we see some of that represented in terms of how people model digital blueprints. So you can model them differently depending on this technology, but the technology itself doesn't directly impact how you design the bots, which is good for customers, because they can actually design their automations technology agnostic and let the development team really choose the right path for that solution. So especially when teams have multiple RPA tools, or even some teams just go offline and they build it with macros, ETL, and Python scripts. It's the same digital blueprint that drives that.
Fantastic. This is really good. There's some really great questions coming up here. So we have a minute or so left here, so I'm gonna be rapid fire with you. So this is a very good questions from Robert Bonomo, a very practical question in terms of marketplace implementation and penetration. How is it happening in the wealth management space, in the investment space, research, portfolio construction processes, from investment, wealth management areas? What type of RPA applications do you see out there?
We haven't seen as many. I mean, personally, I haven't seen as many. I know we have quite a few financial customers that are in that space. Wealth management tends to be a little bit of a tender area. So sometimes the bots we have seen have been a little bit more back office and not as much front and center. I think folks are trying to push forward, but there's just the regulatory constraints. And one of the things that we do is we allow them to create a regulatory mapping so they can map their controls into their automations. So we have customers that are starting to move into there, but just not as primary as we've seen some of the other ones.
I appreciate that, because I appreciate that answer, Matthew, because the focus that you have had is on the operational side, which is very well understood. There's a lot of value to be created there. But Robert, I'll add to this, just because we have been doing so many of these 3-day conferences and multiple topics. There are a couple of references for you, Robert. One is that take a look at what Morningstar is doing. It's not a plug for Morningstar, other than the fact that they have automated like thousands of man hours on their credit rating side of the business, if you will, and many of their financial processes. And we had a Morningstar director of business transformation here with us, who talked extensively about that in the past. We have a couple of conferences coming up that will be focused on that. One will be Business Transformation Operational Excellence Summit, Financial Services Live, and that will be a 3-day conference just on 12 experts on financial services and intelligent automation in that area. So there's a lot going on, you know, with different levels of maturity in different organizations. Let's dive back in here with one final quick one, though we have like 30 seconds left. What about John? It was Guy Torigny, who was one of the first ones to ask this question. Can you use Blueprint to manage and synchronize digital workers to multiple platforms at the same time? Does that make sense to you?
It does. So we're not coordinating it from an orchestration level. What we're able to do, and this is again part of the design, is we're seeing folks that are designing automations, and part of that automation is going to be delivered by a bot that runs at a Blue Prism, and part of the automation maybe runs in an attended fashion through Automation Anywhere. What they can do is actually design the whole automation through digital blueprints, send the part they need to build over to Blue Prism, and then send the other part back over to Automation Anywhere. And it kind of connects the two, and again, it aligns the information, but Blueprint itself is not running it from an orchestration standpoint, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. Matthew, thank you so much for taking the time from Toronto to the world to share your expertise on RPA and what Blueprint is bringing to the market. Fantastic stuff. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Pleasure. Have a great day, Jose, and thank you very much, folks.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Matthew Dodgson from Blueprint, and you did a fantastic job of bringing up some really pertinent questions related to your context, what creates the most value to you, and that was very good. I mean, we had so many questions. I like the energy that we have here. Let's keep that going. At the top of the hour, we're going to wrap up the session, and at the top of the hour, we're going to bring to you the artificial intelligence leader and NetMind chief data scientist from Huawei, and he's going to talk about how to manage the artificial intelligence process, and the name of his talk is that putting humans back in the loop for artificial intelligence. So you do not want to miss this. This is going to be specific insights from Huawei's Noah's Ark lab and project. I think that that Balazs is going to be coming directly to us from France today, if I'm not mistaken, and talking about the research they're doing and the really interesting developments in that area. So don't miss that. Of course, we're going to wrap the session now, and then at the top of the hour, we restart the recording. So join us back then. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, if you have commentary, go onto the link on LinkedIn and you know, ask questions, make comments. We're going to be putting updates there later on today. So that's another way of interacting. You can just look under my name, Jose Perez, at LinkedIn, and you'll be able to see the posting about RPA and Intelligent Automation Live. So without further ado, goodbye for now. I'll see you back at the top of the hour.